34-year-old paternity secret. Mother recently came clean that the man you believe to be your dad is not. You held the secret for just too long, and you felt your son deserved to know, done by the news that you may be the father to a child you had never met, your belief that you are not his dad.
3 o'clock in the morning, my mama called and told me that the person she told me was my daddy and wasn't my father.
And this is what your mother tells you?
Yes.
What are you thinking? What made you make that call at 3 a.m.?
I mean, it's not like the first time either I tried to get in touch with Mr. Newby. And it's something I thought my son deserved to know.
At 3 in the morning, you just said, this is it.
Yes.
For 34 years.
Yes, Your Honor.
When you made the call.
But it was something I had to get off of my chest. I had to let him know. I was very young, a teenager, when this all happened.
Dante Cooper was 34 years old when his entire sense of identity cracked open in the middle of the night. It was around 3 in the morning when his phone rang. Half asleep, he saw his mother's name on the screen and assumed something terrible had happened. Instead, what he heard was a confession she had carried in silence for more than 3 decades. She told him that the man he had believed was his father for his entire life was not his biological father. She told him that another man, someone Dante had never known, might be his real father. She told him to go online to look the man up, and then she asked him not to be angry with her. At first, Dante thought it was a joke. The words didn't make sense. They felt unreal, like something said to shock him awake. But as she kept talking, the truth began to settle in, heavy and suffocating. Questions rushed through his mind faster than he could process them. Who was this man? Why now? Why after all these years? Why had his life been built on something that might not be true? His mother tried to explain that she could not hold the secret anymore, that it had been weighing on her heart and her mind for years, and that she believed her son deserved to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. For 34 years, she had kept this secret. She explained that when Dante was conceived, she was just a teenager herself. She and the man she believed to be Dante's biological father were young, close friends. They were kids, experimenting, not fully understanding the consequences of their actions. When she became pregnant, she didn't even know it at first. She was so young and inexperienced that she didn't recognize the signs. It wasn't until she was 5 months along that another teenage friend, who was also pregnant, suggested that she might be pregnant too. Until that moment, she had no idea what was happening to her body. Out of fear and confusion, she told no one. She didn't tell her parents. She didn't tell the man who might be the father. She didn't tell anyone except that one friend. When her parents finally discovered the truth months later, it was already too late to change the story that formed on its own. Her mother assumed another young man, someone she had gone to a dance with, was the father. That assumption became reality without ever being questioned. Too afraid to speak up, too scared of getting someone in trouble, and too young to understand the long-term consequences, she stayed silent. And that silence followed her son for his entire life. Dante grew up without a father in his home. The man he believed was his biological father was never really present, never truly involved. As a child, Dante felt that absence deeply. He described it as getting off the porch too early, meaning he lost the safety and structure a father might have provided. Without that guidance, he found himself in trouble at a young age, spending more time in the streets than he should have. His mother watched him struggle, and there were moments when she wondered if his life might have been different if he had known his real father. But time kept moving forward, and the secret stayed buried. The man Dante's mother believed might be his real father, a man named Mr. Newby, had no idea any of this had happened. He never saw her pregnant. He never heard a word about a child. Life took him in a different direction. He moved away to another state, built his own family, and lived for decades unaware that there was a possibility he had a son somewhere in the world. That all changed when he received a message on social media. The message was short, direct, and shocking. It said, "You're not going to believe this. This is your child," followed by a picture of Dante. Mr. Newby stared at his phone in disbelief. He thought it had to be a mistake. He immediately asked questions. How could this be? Did Dante know? How could he be the father when he had never even seen Dante's mother pregnant? The message reopened memories from his teenage years, a time when he and his friends were young, careless, and uninformed about protection and consequences. Even then, the idea that he could have a 34-year-old son he had never known was almost impossible to comprehend. When Dante and Mr. Newby finally came face to face in court, both men were carrying decades of unanswered questions and emotional weight. Dante wanted answers not just for himself, but for his children. He wanted to know where he came from. Mr. Newby, on the other hand, felt a deep sense of loss at the idea that if Dante truly was his son, then both of them had missed out on a lifetime together. He spoke about his own father, a good man who would have loved Dante, and the pain of knowing that bond never had a chance to exist. As the case unfolded, emotions filled the courtroom. Dante's mother admitted that the shame surrounding teenage pregnancy at that time played a huge role in her silence. Back then, secrets were often seen as protection, even when they caused harm. She acknowledged that by keeping the truth hidden, she had taken something from her son. The guilt of that decision stayed with her for years, growing heavier as she watched Dante struggle through life without knowing where he truly came from. Mr. Newby's family was drawn into the case as well. His daughter stood in court and spoke honestly about the pain she saw in her father. She didn't know whether Dante was truly her brother, but she said that if he was, their family would be open to accepting him. There was a willingness to build something new, even if it came decades too late. When the DNA results finally arrived, the tension in the room was overwhelming. Everyone hoped for clarity, but no one was prepared for how final the truth would feel. The results showed that Mr. Newby was not Dante's biological father. Just like that, one possible answer disappeared, leaving behind even more questions. Dante was still searching for the truth, and Mr. Newby was left grieving the idea of a son he thought he might have had. The courtroom didn't end in celebration. It ended in reflection, pain, and the understanding that secrets don't disappear just because they are hidden. They wait, they grow, and when they finally surface, they change lives forever. After the first case ended, the courtroom barely had time to breathe before another story unfolded, one that carried a different kind of pain but the same heavy theme of hidden truths. This time, it was a 30-year-old woman named Miranda Miller standing in court, searching for clarity about who her real father was. Unlike Dante, Miranda had grown up calling two different men Dad, believing for most of her life that this strange arrangement was normal. From the time she was a child, Miranda's life had been divided between two worlds. One man, Mr. Wright, was the one she spent most of her time with. His home felt familiar. His family felt like her own. She attended gatherings, birthdays, barbecues, and holidays with them. She looked like them too, or at least she believed she did. The resemblance felt undeniable to her. The other man, Mr. White, was also present in her life, but in a quieter, more distant way. She saw him less often, spoke to him less frequently, but still called him Dad. No one ever explained why things were this way. It was simply how life was. As a child, Miranda didn't question it. Children accept the reality they are given. But as she grew older, the confusion began to settle in. She remembered a moment as a teenager when she innocently said she wanted to go to her dad's house, referring to Mr. Wright. That was the moment everything changed. Her mother, with her back turned, quietly said words that altered Miranda's understanding of her entire life. She told her that she didn't really know who Miranda's father was. She said she believed Mr. Wright was more likely her biological father than Mr. White, but she couldn't be sure. From that day forward, Miranda lived with uncertainty. She continued calling both men Dad, but the word no longer felt simple. It felt heavy. It felt dishonest. Neither man knew about the other. Neither man knew that Miranda herself didn't know the truth. For years, she carried this secret alone, afraid of what would happen if the truth came out, afraid of hurting both men, afraid of destroying the only family structure she had ever known. As she grew into adulthood, the weight of that secret became unbearable. She described it as living a double life. She avoided social media, avoided posting family photos, avoided any situation where the two worlds might collide. When she was with Mr. Wright's family, she stayed silent about Mr. White. When she was around Mr. White, she stayed silent about Mr. Wright. It became second nature to hide parts of herself, to edit her words, to protect everyone else at the cost of her own peace. 2 weeks before coming to court, Miranda reached a breaking point. She realized she could no longer live without knowing the truth. So she gathered the courage she had been building for years and made 2 phone calls that changed everything. She called each man and asked them to prove they were her father. She addressed both of them the same way, calling them Dad, and then took a deep breath before saying she needed answers. She told them what her mother had said. She told them she didn't know who her biological father was. Mr. White was shocked. He had believed for 30 years that Miranda was his daughter. He had been there when she was born. He had held her as a baby. He had loved her unconditionally. The idea that another man might also believe he was her father was something he had never even imagined. He couldn't understand how, after all these years, this truth was only now coming out. He felt blindsided, hurt, and deeply confused. Mr. Wright was equally stunned. He had been present in Miranda's life for decades, sharing memories, milestones, and family bonds. Hearing that there was even a question about whether he was her father shook him to his core. Both men entered the courtroom believing in their hearts that Miranda belonged to them, each one certain in a different way, each one terrified of losing her. In court, Miranda explained how impossible the situation had been for her as a child. She said no one ever sat her down and explained the truth. There were no clear rules, no honest conversations. Instead, she learned through silence, through what wasn't said. She learned which names were forbidden in which houses. She learned how to switch versions of herself depending on where she was. Over time, this became her normal, but it never stopped hurting. The judge acknowledged how confusing and damaging this must have been for a child. Growing up believing you have 2 biological fathers is something no child should have to navigate. The adults around her had failed to provide clarity, and as a result, Miranda grew up carrying emotional responsibility that never should have been hers. Both men spoke openly about their love for Miranda. Mr. White described the moment he first held her as a baby, how she clung to him, how he had loved her ever since. He said that no matter what the DNA results showed, she would always be his daughter in his heart. Mr. Wright spoke about the bond he felt with her, how close she was to his family, how deeply connected she was to them. He believed with everything in him that she was his child. Photos were shown in court, side-by-side images comparing Miranda to both families. The resemblance to Mr. Wright's family was striking, but there were similarities with Mr. White too. Even the judge admitted how remarkable it was to see the physical similarities pulling in both directions. The uncertainty only grew stronger. As the moment of truth approached, the emotional tension in the courtroom became almost unbearable. Miranda's hands shook as she waited. She said she felt torn between her heart and her mind. Her heart told her one thing. Her instincts told her another. She was terrified of the outcome, not because she didn't want the truth, but because she knew the truth would hurt someone she loved, no matter what it was. The judge spoke gently to both men, asking if they were prepared for a negative result. Mr. White said that if the truth brought Miranda peace, then he could accept it, even if it broke his heart. Mr. Wright struggled to answer, overwhelmed by emotion, but made it clear that Miranda would always be his baby, regardless of biology. When the DNA results were finally read, the courtroom fell silent. The words came slowly, carefully, as if to soften the blow that followed. The results showed that Mr. White was Miranda's biological father. The reaction was immediate and devastating. Mr. Wright broke down, overwhelmed by grief. 30 years of believing, loving, and bonding crashed into a single moment of loss. He cried openly, repeating that Miranda was still his baby, that nothing could change that. Miranda herself was shaken, apologizing through tears, struggling with guilt for the pain her search for truth had caused. The judge reminded everyone that biology does not erase love, that the bond built over decades cannot be undone by a piece of paper. But the pain in the room was undeniable. This was the cost of secrets kept too long, of truths delayed until they explode instead of gently unfold. As the case ended, it was clear that while the truth had finally been revealed, healing would take time. Relationships would need to be rebuilt, redefined, and reshaped. Miranda had her answer, but it came with heartbreak on all sides. The courtroom was left with the same lesson it had seen again and again. When the truth is hidden, it doesn't disappear. It waits, and when it finally comes out, it demands to be felt by everyone involved. The final story began with a sense of exhaustion already hanging in the air, as if everyone in the courtroom understood that once again, they were about to witness how confusion, fear, and silence can shape an entire life. This time, the focus was on a young child named Josiah, and two adults whose lives had become tangled by doubt, love, and responsibility. Mr. Hunter came to court convinced of one thing. There was no way he was Josiah's biological father. From his perspective, the case wasn't about emotions or memories. It was about logic and fairness. He believed the child's mother, Miss Holden, was accusing him of being the father because of the financial stability he provided. He explained that he had stepped up in every way a father should, paying for diapers, milk, clothes, and daily needs, but deep down, he carried doubts that never fully went away. Miss Holden, on the other hand, stood firm in her belief that Mr. Hunter was Josiah's father. She admitted that confusion had existed early on because of incorrect medical information, but she insisted that she was now completely certain. To her, this wasn't about money. It was about the truth and about protecting her child from more uncertainty. Their relationship history revealed how complicated the situation really was. They had known each other since they were teenagers, living on the same street. At first, they were just friends. Both were in other relationships at the time, and there were no expectations beyond friendship. Over time, those relationships ended, and their connection slowly changed. One night during Miss Holden's birthday celebration, things crossed a line. Alcohol blurred judgment, boundaries faded, and a platonic friendship turned into something physical. From that point on, their stories stopped aligning. They disagreed about nearly everything, whether they had sex that night, whether protection was used, and how serious their relationship actually was. Mr. Hunter believed they were careful. Miss Holden insisted they were not. What was clear, though, was that this was not a committed relationship. There was no promise, no exclusivity, no clear understanding between them. Miss Holden admitted that during this time, she was also involved with another man. She said she was honest about that later, but not immediately. When she found out she was pregnant, she told Mr. Hunter first. She described calling him over, feeling exhausted and sick, and finally telling him the truth. His reaction was immediate and emotional. He told her the news broke his heart, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't want more children. Still, he assumed the baby was his, and chose to step into the role of a father without hesitation. As time passed, Mr. Hunter became emotionally attached to Josiah. He bonded with him, loved him, and treated him as his own. Even as doubts lingered, his actions never changed. He was present. He was supportive. He was consistent. That emotional bond made the uncertainty even harder to carry. When Miss Holden eventually admitted that there was a possibility another man could be Josiah's father, the foundation of trust between them cracked. Mr. Hunter felt betrayed and confused. He questioned how someone could be so sure while also admitting doubt. To him, the word could mattered. It meant uncertainty, and uncertainty meant he deserved answers. The courtroom listened as both sides spoke, not just with words but with visible emotion. Mr. Hunter wasn't cold or uncaring. He was conflicted. He loved the child, but he was afraid of being used and afraid of having his heart broken. Miss Holden wasn't manipulative or dismissive. She was overwhelmed, trying to hold together a situation that had grown bigger than she ever expected. The judge pointed out the reality neither of them could escape. When adults make choices without clarity, children inherit the consequences. Josiah didn't ask to be born into confusion. He didn't ask for doubt. All he knew was the love he received, and that love was real, regardless of biology. As the DNA results were prepared, the tension in the room was thick. Both parties tried to prepare themselves, but preparation only goes so far when the outcome could change your life. Mr. Hunter said that if the child wasn't his, it would hurt deeply, but he needed the truth to move forward. Miss Holden said she believed the truth would finally bring stability, no matter what it revealed. When the results were read, the courtroom fell silent once again. The decision was final. Biology had spoken. The truth was clear. The emotional aftermath was complex. There was relief, but also pain. There was clarity, but also loss. No one celebrated. No one won. What remained was the reality that love and responsibility do not disappear just because DNA says otherwise. Bonds formed through care, time, and sacrifice leave marks that cannot be erased. As the case closed, the judge reminded everyone of something that echoed through all three stories that day. Secrets don't protect people forever. Confusion doesn't stay contained. And silence, no matter how well-intentioned, eventually demands a price. The truth may hurt, but it also gives people the chance to stop living in doubt and start healing. For the children at the center of these cases, the hope was that clarity would bring peace rather than more pain. For the adults, the lesson was undeniable. Honesty, even when it feels impossible, is kinder than waiting decades to speak. Because when the truth finally comes out, it doesn't just change the present. It rewrites the past, reshapes relationships, and leaves everyone wondering how different life might have been if the truth had been told sooner. Dante Cooper was 34 years old when his entire sense of identity cracked open in the middle of the night. It was around 3 in the morning when his phone rang. Half asleep, he saw his mother's name on the screen and assumed something terrible had happened. Instead, what he heard was a confession she had carried in silence for more than 3 decades. She told him that the man he had believed was his father for his entire life was not his biological father. She told him that another man, someone Dante had never known, might be his real father. She told him to go online to look the man up, and then she asked him not to be angry with her. At first, Dante thought it was a joke. The words didn't make sense. They felt unreal, like something said to shock him awake. But as she kept talking, the truth began to settle in, heavy and suffocating. Questions rushed through his mind faster than he could process them. Who was this man? Why now? Why after all these years? Why had his life been built on something that might not be true? His mother tried to explain that she could not hold the secret anymore, that it had been weighing on her heart and her mind for years, and that she believed her son deserved to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. For 34 years, she had kept this secret. She explained that when Dante was conceived, she was just a teenager herself. She and the man she believed to be Dante's biological father were young, close friends. They were kids, experimenting, not fully understanding the consequences of their actions. When she became pregnant, she didn't even know it at first. She was so young and inexperienced that she didn't recognize the signs. It wasn't until she was 5 months along that another teenage friend,